In the last episode, video 8, we noticed something remarkable about moral authority. We all know that gravity pulls on us, but it never speaks to us. Chemistry affects us, but it never judges us. But moral authority behaves differently. It confronts us. It speaks to our conscience, which holds us accountable for our choices. And that raises an extraordinary question. If moral law really exists, and it appears that it does, and if it behaves like a real standard that stands over us, and it certainly seems to, then a deeper question naturally follows. Who or what stands behind it? And beyond that, an even deeper question emerges. Can law of any kind exist without a lawgiver? Hi, I'm Martin Braden, and welcome to my channel, Dispelling the Accusatory Fog. This is the 9th video of the series of videos I'm doing for 2026 called Faith, Reason, and the Search for Truth. This series is supplemental to the book I wrote in response to Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion. My book is titled An Atheist's Delusion, written from my Latter-day Saint perspective as a theist. The series' first 10 videos have been and will be focused on preparing your mind for when we begin our review of Chapter 1 of The God Delusion. In today's video, video 9, we'll be taking the next step to our journey where we'll be exploring, can law exist without a lawgiver? In earlier episodes, we saw that moral authority embeds moral law, and so it behaves very differently from ordinary physical laws. Physical laws describe what does happen in nature. Moral laws describe what ought to happen. Gravity explains why objects fall. Chemistry explains how substances react, but moral law does something very different. It evaluates behavior. It tells us that some things are right and others are wrong, and strangely enough, it expects us to care. Now think about this. When we talk about laws, we normally mean rules established by someone. Governments make laws. Courts interpret them. Judges and law enforcement officers enforces them. Such laws are not simple descriptions. They are instructions issued by minds. Imagine discovering a set of rules carved into a stone on a desert island. Rules about honesty, rules about fairness, rules about responsibility. What would you assume? You wouldn't assume the rock produced them itself. You would assume someone wrote them into the stone. And that's because laws normally point back to a mind behind them, a lawgiver. But moral law seems different. It wasn't voted into existence. It wasn't invented by a parliament. Yet across cultures and centuries, people recognize many of the same obligations: honesty, justice, fairness, responsibility, which raises an intriguing puzzle. If moral law exists but no human government created it, where did it come from? Some people suggest a simpler possible answer, and that is that morality is just a social agreement. In other words, societies create moral rules because cooperation helps communities survive. For example, rules against stealing help maintain trust. Rules about fairness prevent chaos. In this view, morality is simply something societies invent. But there is a problem with that explanation. If society invents morality, then society itself could never be truly morally wrong. It could only be different. But history and our lived experiences tell a very different story. There have been societies that practiced slavery, societies that oppressed minorities, societies that committed terrible injustices. And when we look back on those things today, we do not say those societies were just following different customs. We say something stronger. We say they were wrong. But notice what that means. If we can judge societies themselves as morally wrong, then the standard or authority we are appealing to must be higher than the society itself, which suggests moral law is not merely invented. Another explanation is often offered today. Perhaps morality is simply the result of evolutionary instinct. Human beings evolved in groups that cooperated and survived, so over time certain instincts developed: empathy, fairness, protecting family, helping the group. Evolutionary biology may indeed explain why we have certain moral feelings, but there is something it does not explain. Instincts explain impulses. They do not explain obligation. Animals, birds, and insects live by laws of instinct, whereas human beings live by laws of moral agency. For example, hunger is an instinct, but hunger never says, "You ought to obey me." Fear is an instinct, but fear never claims moral authority. Yet moral law does something different. It doesn't simply push us, it judges us. Quite often, it even tells us to resist our instincts, warning us that if we do, something in us knows we have done wrong. It warns us to tell the truth when lying would benefit us. It prompts us to protect someone weaker, even at a personal cost. It even moves us to sacrifice for strangers. On the left side of this image, we see salmon, birds migrating, wolves hunting. Their lived experiences are brought about by laws of instinct. On the right side, we see a man returning a wallet to a woman, a man protecting a little child, a man helping an injured stranger, and a man making a decision to be healthy by refusing unhealthy food. So, moral law behaves very differently from instinct. It stands above our impulses, evaluating them. If humans operate under moral agency and its laws, then something must exist that authorizes and judges that agency, which naturally leads toward moral law and ultimately a lawgiver. Now the puzzle begins to deepen. Moral law judges our actions, expects obedience, speaks to our conscience, applies across cultures, and confronts us personally. It behaves less like a physical force and more like an authority. This is where the imagery of the hall of moral law becomes helpful. Imagine walking deeper into a great hall. Along the walls are engraved words: justice, truth, responsibility, honor. At first they look like simple principles, but the deeper we walk into the hall, the more we realize something unsettling. These laws do not merely describe behavior. They stand over us. They evaluate us. They hold us accountable. Physical laws are simply patterns. They describe what objects do. Planets orbit stars. Water freezes at certain temperatures. Gravity pulls matter together. But moral law does something very different. It does not merely describe behavior. It addresses our behavior. It tells us what we ought to do. And when we fail to live up to it, something inside us responds. We feel guilt. We feel accountability, which raises a deeper question. Why would the universe contain a law that addresses us in this way? If moral law is real, if it confronts our conscience, if it behaves like an authority over us, then one possibility begins to emerge. Perhaps moral law does not exist on its own. Perhaps law, any law, ultimately points back to a lawgiver. This does not yet tell us who or what the lawgiver is, but it does suggest that moral law may be pointing beyond itself. And if it is, we must ask ourselves, can law exist without a lawgiver? Okay, we're right on the cusp of the answer to the question of who or what's behind moral law's authority. So far, we've come to know that moral authority is real and not an illusion or a preference. And one of the chief reasons behind this realization is that our reasoning answered the question, why does accountability feel so personal? It's personal because moral law behaves like someone that's always addressing us, which led us to ask ourselves, is there a mind behind moral authority? Okay, I'm going to leave it there for now. Until video 10 goes live, I want you to be thinking about what I just said and ask yourself, if there isn't a lawgiver overseeing the universe, then why would the universe contain a law that addresses us in this way? And if there truly is a lawgiver behind moral law, what kind of mind could stand behind a law like this? These are the questions we will begin exploring in video 10. So until next time, I wish you continued success. Goodbye. God bless you.